consultants and experts on the team that are evaluating those things that you're talking about when they give us, the plans.
Your statements don't make anybody feel any better about taking out 100-year-old trees that you can never replace.
I replace trees out.
Yes, sir.
Yes, a couple of different times you mentioned, and someone explicitly asked if you had any drawings that we could see, and I know you said you're working on those drawings, right? And because you need to resubmit for your permitting. I'm sure you have original drawings of what you intend to do, and when you're out there clearing land without a drawing, you had original drawings of what you wanted to do first. And now you need to redraw your plan, yes?
A portion of it.
Yeah, a portion of the plan. So how soon will you have some kind of new drawing or rendering available that we could see? And how will this, and I'm addressing this to some of the folks from the city too, how will this integrate with the planned work that will be done on Goodwin? And so how will water flow through there now after Goodwin is changed based on that plan? So I'm curious how this all will come together in one big solution to moving water along when we need to do that. Because it becomes a traffic problem if that's your entrance right there. And that starts to, it floods like it often does now with that low water crossing there. That's a problem for you. So obviously you all are thinking through how that cannot be a problem. And I'd like to be in on that understanding. How will that work?
Two things on that. To your first question about the actual plan through the creek with the hike and bike trail, those have not been completed with the city yet. As far as the exact route, we knew that we were going to do it. That was discussed out of the gate. But the actual location of where we've even talked about putting a hike and bike trail along the entry road and diagonal into the creek. Those discussions just hadn't been finalized yet between the city's parks department and the developer and landscape architect. But to your question about the entry road, so the entry road is Goodwin dives down. We're not actually down at the bottom of the entry road, it's up at the top. So when the floodplain is remapped with this development, which is separate from the city's, that portion will be out of the floodplain. When Goodwin comes through, I mean, I just talked to the city's CIP, Nate Garza, just the other day to coordinate their stuff with the cat files that we're using, because they're doing the bridge crossing there, and they're gonna have their own study as well. So ours will update to the point of Goodwin right away, they take it there and they continue. We're just not allowed to make it worse. Yeah, so we can lower the water surface, just can't raise it.
And I don't want to be misunderstood, because I do want to get back to the original question that I had about how soon you will have some kind of drawing, because I'm not talking about height and bike here, I'm talking about what you had intended to do there with the property. Because clearly you're moving dirt, moving trees, and you had an original plan. Now, when will you have a new plan? How soon, what's the timeline on that? We can have something to see.
Yeah, so I think the creek grading versus the parks are probably two different sets of things. So with the creek, we're hoping to get something redesigned with our team in the next week. Hopefully, we've got some analysis to run on the flood side. And then we hope to get submitted to the city, which we have to go through their approval process on that. And then subsequent to that would be more of a official parks plan. So that would be, and it depends on the approval process with the city, just ranges. I'd call it 60 days. Depends.
So are you on hold for 60 days?
We are not working in the creek for 60 days. The project, yes ma'am. Well, in 60 days, it's until we get approval on the updated plan. So I said 60 days, but it just depends on when we get approval on the updated plan. That's when work would be allowed to continue. Yes ma'am.
Yes, I'm a representative from the NRRCA, which is the National Register for Resource and Conservation Services in the United States. It is a federal program that is handled in cahoots with 50 Army Corps of Engineers. When I saw what was happening at Alligator Creek, I called my associates with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they sent a representative down this weekend, and we walked Alligator Creek. This person is from the Waco and Fort Worth office. It is against federal law, and federal law supersedes TCEQ. Federal law supersedes City of New Braunfels. Federal law supersedes Comal County. It is against federal law. FEMA is a subset of our division. It is against federal law to stop, fill in, block, impede, destroy, disrupt, demolish, or in any way add soil, rock, or any type to a natural water flow. Even if water is not flowing in there, if it is a seasonal creek or a dry creek, if it ever flowed, and I have photographic documentation of it being 5 foot deep across Goodwin Lane, so yes, sir, it has flowed, and that has been within the last 2 years. It is against federal law for you to fill that in, to bulldoze it, to tear it up, to grade it, or do anything to it. I hope you answer your phone tomorrow morning.
She's
I
absolutely right.
just to,
And when you started your presentation, you were mea culpa. Please, it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. I checked with the Army Corps of Engineers and my supervisors at NRCS. You do not, nor have you filed, nor have you submitted any request or permit to allow you to do what you have done.
Yeah, and back to what she just said, like I told you, we're right behind you. Our house is right there with that retention pond, and last year when it rained, the entire pond was to the top with tree trunks that came in from Alligator Creek into the retention pond. That's a big distance and something pretty powerful to come into Wasser Ranch. I mean, that's a lot of water, and this was last year. Last October. We could not believe how much water was in there, how many birds came there. We had over 70 birds in that, temporary pond. It was just unbelievable to me that Alligator Creek is being tampered with in any way, because and all the wildlife that's there, all the deer that is just scattered. Now we've got deer on the side of the road that's been hit. They don't know where to go for shelter or for water. So it's really sad. But to the city, my husband and I went to the courthouse because we wanted to know what was going on. We couldn't imagine what was happening, and we were shown the only approved plans for Orion Park. And she told us, this is the only thing that we have here that I can show you that's been approved. She said, developers don't have to provide us anything, but this is all we have that's been approved. And when she showed it to us, and she helped us maneuver with it because we didn't understand what we were seeing, and it looks like Orion Park is like right in that area where y'all are bulldozing and doing things. So I don't understand what's going on.
So far, I want to point out, if we need to have conversations, we're open for conversation. We're talking with the city. We're not, if we need to talk to the Corps of Engineers, we never set out to do anything improper, illegal. We're trying to get it right. And I'm not.
You may not set out, but you
No,
have. I'm just asking you, as someone that lives, we all back up right up to Alligator Creek, so we've seen the wildlife. I'm worried to death that the creek is gonna overflow and then my house is gonna be affected. I understand that you didn't personally wake up one morning and say you wanted to defend me personally, but stop saying that. We're upset. I know you didn't intend to do that, but tell me that we're gonna work out a solution together, because every time you say that, I keep going, he's not taking responsibility. It's unfortunate that you're standing here being the one that's talking to us, taking responsibility. I get it, I'm in the construction biz. I take a lot of ass shootings that aren't mine. I get that. Please stop saying that to me. I want to know what is the plan moving forward. And then you said, well, listen, what it looks like today is not what it's gonna look like tomorrow. I don't trust that what you tell me is what it's gonna look like tomorrow. Because you already showed me a picture and then came and did something opposite. The city did not stop you before all the trees went down. The city did not stop. So who's going to stop you if something, a miscommunication happens again? So teach me how to trust you again in knowing that whatever you get submitted by the city will look at, approve, and someone will be watching that that doesn't happen again. Because we barely have one oak tree left back there. And if me and his wife don't chain ourselves to it as American Indian women and make sure that y'all don't take it down, that's what's gonna happen. Because I don't trust you any longer, or your company any longer. So start over, teach me how the next process is gonna work. We screwed up, things have happened. Where do we go from here? That I don't get flooded and the trees don't come down? What's gonna happen?
We're working through getting the approvals needed by the city.
Okay, can somebody from the city tell me, how is it gonna happen that this, a permit doesn't come through and then something completely opposite happens? Who from the city can tell me? As a neighbor, as a citizen, tell me it's not gonna happen again.
Where's the buck stop?
So
Yeah.
right now, as was mentioned, permits have to be resubmitted for the work that's in Alligator Creek. Okay, that was not a part of the two approved permits that were done for the sunflower.
Which means that they're negligent.
As far as that, now, again, that's something that we have to review the submission. And then at that point, just like any other permit, we'll have a pre-construction meeting. And then it'll be focused in on what's ended up as far as working on Alligator Creek. Now, again, some of the things that have been said is from the meeting that Richard mentioned last week with the city is we need to make sure that FEMA's been addressed and the Corps of Engineers. So that's something that the city will be looking for. So again, it's one of those things to where we'll inspect it like any other development that we have that comes up.
Isn't that kind of backwards though? Shouldn't you have done that to start with? Totally backwards. I mean, you're the city, you're the one ultimately responsible for issuing these permits. So isn't it really your responsibility to make sure that all the federal laws are being obeyed and EPA and FEMA and all that?
Because the Alligator Creek project that work was not in the permits, the city couldn't, this is the first time we saw it after the work had already started.
So then your excuse is, since it wasn't in there, people can go in and destroy whatever and then come back later and you go, oh, well, gee,
No,
we
sir.
didn't know about it, so it's okay, but we'll just have to deal
That's
with it.
why we stopped work. And again, it's one of those things to where, it's something to where, because we didn't have anything to look at or review, and it happened really, really fast, again, it's one of those things to where, but
But
we
it's
stopped.
in the Alligator Creek watershed. I mean, somebody at the city, an engineer, is supposed to be aware that anything remotely close to a watershed, they better check everything, cross their Ts and dot their Is, especially with the federal government, since they're really ultimately the ones that have the authority, not the city. So why didn't someone do that?
Ultimately, the developer's responsible for whatever's finally decided out there. But again, from the city's perspective, that was not a part of the permit. The city did not sign off for the work that was done in Alligator Creek. Now, we're gonna be looking at it, but at this time, the city has not signed off on that particular design that came from the developer.
Will they be fine?
The city doesn't have anything in code as far as that. Now, again, it's one of those things to where if the hydraulics cannot be addressed, then we'll work with the development on that. So and that's kind of what Richard alluded to. There's a lot of question marks still right now, and that's one of the things where that's what they're working, but they have to meet, city code requirement along with any federal or state that's out there too.
So to clarify, there's no fines going to be imposed for this?
Again, it's one of those things to where at this time,
I mean, we're out here, fining tradesmen for not having plugs hung at the right height, and yet somebody can decimate an entire portion of a creek, and that's absolutely okay?
the city has nothing in code as far as.
Okay, so people going forward can do something as long as it's not in the code, and the city's not gonna impose any legal ramifications on that?
Create a penalty that's not already on city code.
Well, there has to be,
Doesn't that incentivize developers to then itchy little fingers to put construction equipment down on a site without having, the right permits.
Again, it's one of those things to where.
Because we've got another property up on I-35 in Oak Creek Estates, where we also don't have permits, and there's deep holes and large piles of dirt,
Yes, sir.
which becomes a hazard to, I mean, let's just face it, kids, I've seen kids down there, you can't keep kids off of it because.
Ultimately, that development is responsible for the safety. I know Councilmember Bradley has been working with their building department to get the fencing out there. They said-
Right, the point I'm trying to get to is that incentivizes developers, when there's no fines or repercussions from the city, to go out and start the work ahead of time, ahead of schedule, ahead of budget, because you're gonna be ahead of the game.
And without
I mean,
permits.
that's what I would do as a project manager, is try to start as quick as I could, and cut some corners.
Only they apologize after the fact.
And again, I can't answer that as far as the city goes.
So,
Yeah, sorry, then we can go here next, he's had his hand.
First off, thank you for coming out, keeping your word with the city council in this meeting right here. I understand that you had the meeting, but, you know, it would have been a little bit helpful if you would have brought a plan with you. I'm aware that it takes, what you take out is not gonna be put back in. I'm aware of that. All right, as much as I'd like to say I'm happy with it, I'm not. But I know you're gonna do the right thing by planting, you know, trees and natural grass and stuff, to try stuff to bring this back. A lot of people sitting here tonight that I'm hearing, you know, I've been out, some of us here in this room has been out there over 25, 30 years. Even less than that. The two original subdivisions are Northwest Crossing and Quail Valley. Them were the only two that was out there for many years. We were like the stepchild of New Braunfels. Nobody wanted us when we came in. And when they built Foster Ranch and they shifted the creek, you know, that subdivision don't keep getting no heck for it, but I'll tell you what, this guy's receiving a lot of heck for doing that. Now, let me tell you, it's gonna happen. Growth is gonna happen. We ain't gonna stop. The best thing to do is we all come up with a plan and work together, because hitting this guy up, telling him what's illegal, I made it clear the other night, the city council, is, you know, things are gonna happen. We gotta do it. We gotta make it right, and make it right for the people. We need a wildlife refugee, and we've been trying to get this Oak Creek, well, not Oak Creek, but the Alligator Creek into place forever now. We need to get together on that. Who owns the creek? I have not heard who owns the creek, besides the people who, hey, it's on my property. Is that the truth? Is that right? If it's on my property, I own it. You're the watershed guy, you talk.
My understanding is that for a non-navigable water body, which Alligator Creek would be classified as,
Right.
if it's less than 30 feet in width, average over the course, and it does not carry water year-round, it would be non-navigable, and it would belong to the property owner. So
Okay, so
that's my
that was
understanding.
it, that's it. Man right there runs the rules, he says that you own your section of the creek, you just can't dam it up and distort it to where it floods out people downstream. You already said you're in talks with the parks to approve, and I know you was included on the first plan of the parks, according to the preliminary. So everybody's involved. I know the city hasn't purchased the land, because that's coming in with the bond issues and stuff like that. And then detention ponds. You keep reverting back to this detention. Are we doing a pulling method there, or are we doing a detention pond? Because when you do a detention pond, it's to where the water would flow coming off of your parks, housing, roads and stuff. Now, if that's going into a detention pond, it's detained till it gets further down the road. Or are we doing a pooling to where it pools over out of the creek? Which one are we doing?
Well, first, just to your point about part of why I don't have a bunch of plans and stuff, I'm not disappearing overnight.
Right.
I wanna get everybody's name and phone number. I'm happy to come back and update and so forth, but I don't wanna put up pictures of the park or of what we're gonna do down there. That's the only, yeah.
We need to start with step A. Step A is where are you gonna do your pooling?
Yeah.
Are you gonna do the detention ponds?
Yeah.
Because you already got the earth tore
Yeah.
up.
James can talk about the pooling thing, but I just wanted, before he did that, I just wanted to say,
I just
part
wanted
of
to
it
thank
is
you
like,
for
we're not
this
disappearing,
too.
I wanna get everybody's name and phone number, and we can set up another meeting. I'm not going anywhere, so I will be here to update you as those things are approved. So you can talk about
Okay.
that.
Sure, on the detention, it is not a detention pond. A detention pond is intended to accept the water and drain it all out. So the one that's to the north, that's kind of more rectangular, that's part of Wasser. If you look at it, they actually opened that up so the creek would flow into it.
And that's a pooling method, yes.
Well, it's just a way to allow the water to come in. So they were using it for hydraulic reasons for
Right.
engineering. So with this was not that. The design of this did not require it. It was purely for just excavate. So what we did was across the creek, I understand that the construction traffic went through it, but the excavation occurred across the creek.
Right.
Where they were just digging down. Like there isn't a natural way for the water to come in unless the creek actually got to that high elevation.
Okay, so that's on your part, where you're putting in like you said, you were creating a pond area?
That's across the creek, yes.
That's across the creek, which does not fall on your property, right?
It's on our
It's on your
Yeah,
property.
It's just
So-
across the creek on the.
And your pond's gonna stay in that area, you're not gonna venture off onto the lake, the creek side?
No, sir, no, sir.
When you feed into what you're describing, I think is it a pool, Greg? Or is it you talked about the hydraulics on it, is it as far as I don't wanna say.
You're talking about the work that we stopped?
No, what he said they're doing is they're gonna build a area where the water runs off into? Is that what I'm?
It doesn't, so the creek runs around the excavation that
Right.
occurred up on, like, it's almost up on top of the hill, about probably 70 feet. And then we dug down there to make that a pond, kind of similar to what Wasser has staggered up. The only difference is there's not a cut in that to allow the creek to just flow into it.
Right.
It only will flow into it when it fills up to that level.
Okay.
It wasn't done for engineering or hydraulic need.
Okay.
It was done to generate the material.
And that's what yours is as well, right? The cost of the riverbed and banks was due to needing a borrow pit.
The riverbed and the banks, they did not dig or fill it.
No, but you created that pool because you took all those materials. The reason why you destroy the creek bank is because you need the material across the creek.
You're talking about like where they went back and forth across it?
The other side, where the pool is. So when I hear detention ponds, it's a very fancy word for we needed the materials, and what you're left is a pond.
That was the reason for the ponds, yes.
Okay, and that's why you destroyed the creek bed, is because you need those materials on the other side.
To be clear on that, like, I like the pond that's, and maybe other people don't, but the thought was having the pond that's north on Wasser, we thought was a nice amenity for that area out there.
What is the amenity?
It's not an
Like,
amenity.
It's a crater that somebody took all the material out of it.
Unnecessary.
It doesn't fill with water.
and that's fine, but I just want you to understand, if somebody doesn't view it that way, or nobody views it that way.
What do you view it? How do you view that?
I like it.
What do you like
And
about
I've done
it?
it in other.
What do you like about it? Is there ducks in the pond? Is there water skiing? Is there an amphitheater? What about it attracts you, that makes you think that that hole in the ground is so beautiful?
I've done ponds that do have those things. If people don't like it, that's okay, but I just want you to understand what the intent was there. It doesn't,
The
like you
intent
said, you
was-
don't have to like it.
The intent was the borrow pit, to take the fill, right, to another construction site.
It was a dual benefit in my mind. I've done plenty of deals where we have ponds and they are nice amenities.
So what's the benefit of the pond that's there right now?
Which one?
The dry earthen bowl into the ground,
Are you talking about on our site?
the one on Wasser Ranch.
The one on the north?
Right.
I don't think he was referring.
Oh, you're
I'm not
referring to
talking
one
the
you
one
got?
on the
Okay.
houses. We're talking
No,
about-
the ones that have water. Yeah, the way.
Got it, okay.
They're actual Wasser Ranch, I think.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you took out all the trees and all the vegetation there to get the materials on the other side.
that was part of it, but it was also that we thought it was gonna be an amendment. So, if someone doesn't agree with that, that's okay, but it wasn't purely because we need materials for the sign. That wasn't the only reason. It's my, on that. Let me go to Donald, because he hasn't had a chance to speak yet, so.
That's okay, because I'm sure I'm the last person who probably gonna talk.
Not like it.
Okay, we're gonna take a little reminisce back to all the problems with the rezone. And if I remember correctly, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I believe if I remember correctly, when we talked about the apartments that we didn't want, and the quote was, those trees are 20 feet tall, nobody will ever see into your backyard from the apartments. Well, here we are today, and guess what if you'd have built apartments? They'd have a bird's eye view in everybody's backyard. So, now, let's start where we're at now. I am on the Alligator Creek Committee. When we started that committee, I asked the initial question, can anything be done to that creek to clean it up, work it, because we've got the water improvement project going up on basically the left side if you're going south, if you're going north, I mean.
Okay.
And then you're gonna have the Goodwin Lane project going on. So I asked the question, could any of that be cleaned up? My answer was, that creek cannot be touched, period. This came from the city and the Parks Commission and everybody that sat on this committee with me. That creek couldn't be touched. Can't clean it up. There was minimal underbrush things that you could take out because it may be clogging something up and could be causing another problem. So that was my answer. The whole time I went to all the committee meetings, things that we talked about, things that people called if I couldn't make the committee, all of that happened. So now I go back into to Wasser Ranch, which I was on the board, and I am telling them this is the facts that I know to be true. So once the rezoning issue happened, you got 0 lot for that 19 acres up front. Our understanding was that wasn't gonna be touched, that tree line doesn't get touched. And then we also got told that there was a part of that right of way that was sold to MBU for the purposes of the water improvement project. And the city is also supposed to be buying part of Wasser Ranch where the pond's at to build a road around while the bridge is being built during the Goodwin Lane project. So my questions are this. In my hand is when I got the notification that effective December 27, 2021, we were no longer in the flood zone where I lived on Zabel. So if I'm not in the flood zone anymore, what y'all have done, does that change that for the residents there? Do we have an answer to that question?
No, sir.
Has anybody asked FEMA that question?
So the model that occurs for that, the reason that you go to FEMA is to actually remap their
I understand.
their current map. The development within it is handled under the city's jurisdiction with the
Okay.
development permit. So that model, it does not raise it
But the
at all.
people in Wasser are gonna need that. The reason is, I don't know if the people are here about their pool. They got told by the city that they had the permit for the pool because they're in the flood zone.
Are you on the?
So that-
They're in the,
I'm on ends right at
yeah,
the
you're on
entrance.
ends.
Yes.
So
So
they're
I have to get a special
what used to be
permit.
the Kenrick Model Home.
Yep, and I'm in the process
And so
of
she
getting.
backs up
yep.
to the retention pond, or the hole in the ground, if anybody wants to call that, or whatever. So now, but this says she's not.
And I'm in the process of getting FEMA to get the same letter because the city says I'm in a flood zone,
So-
and then I just got a quote.
But
from flood
back,
insurance
let me
$1,400.
finish, and then y'all can throw me out, or whatever it is y'all wanna do. So, we get done with this, and then that road, now, where your entranceway is, does that affect the road around the bridge that has to be built for Goodwin Lane, where your entrance is gonna be? And oh, by the way, it still has to get around what used to be that portion of Alligator Creek. That's a question that needs to be answered, that the city has to answer. So, what are the how does that affect all that? Next, let's go back to the tree issue. I am assuming the right-of-way area, those trees that is a buffer between Goodwin Lane and Wasser Ranch side of that, are, as you state, the north side, because you use direction versus just a place. So that tree line right there, that right-of-way that was sold to MBU for the water improvement project, I'm assuming that row of trees has got to come down, because the right-of-ways, they have to put the pipe and all that. That's gonna be in there, so those trees are gonna come down, which is gonna leave just a little bit of trees that is right there at the low rock crossing. So then walk back up into that and walk into the back side of Wasser Ranch where the Alligator Creek trail piece is, that has to stop at Wasser Ranch that Wasser had to put in, that you technically have to tie into under the rules of being part of the Alligator Creek, because you are required to build that trail, or that trail, not a trailhead. Let me rephrase that, because we'll get to that in a minute. So you're required to put that in, and it ties into the back of Wasser Ranch. Well, that water flow is now redirected. It's not the same. The other question that people are gonna ask is, Wasser Ranch, when they built that, we have a bridge that is not maintained by the city, that has to be maintained by the HOA. Right across there is the other part of Alligator Creek. It has standing water in it. Now, right now, I don't know how much is in it, because we haven't had rain in forever, but it tends to seem to stand water, it lasts a long time. I've never seen it ever dry. The answer was, couldn't touch that. We asked the HOA, can't be touched, so we can't do anything to clean that up. But you guys cleaned up your side. Doesn't seem right on the city side, if you ask me. Seems like we've got two sets of rules here. Neither here nor there. We've kicked that ball way down the rabbit hole here, so we are where we are with that. So with all of that said, now that water that's got to come out of there, that's going to flow right through the bridge side, that goes down and it drains into the big retention area. But water from that Alligator Creek used to flow into that retention. And back in October, what they were talking about, in literally overnight, that pond was completely full, and water from Alligator Creek was flowing into it along with logs and all of this. That doesn't exist anymore. Where's that water going to go? That question needs to be answered. And if that isn't affecting the flood deal, that's great if it doesn't affect that. But somebody's going to have to tell these residents why it is not going to affect them. My bigger issue is, kind of for me, is the fact that being on the committee and being told you can't touch that creek. It is gone. That part of that creek doesn't even exist as anything what it looked like. Now, let's get into the park thing that I'm assuming you guys may be deciding to donate some land in that park, wherever, if it looks like it's gonna be in the back, if I'm understanding correctly, back there where the trail piece would be. That would be in a flood area, and of course, if it floods, then you won't be able to use that park. Where are you gonna put the trailhead for parking? And then on top of that, if you don't have a trailhead for parking, then all of those people that are gonna come use that public park are gonna have to park in Wasser Ranch or in your community from outside. So you're gonna drive some traffic into there unless you can come up with a trailhead for parking in order for that to happen, which that was part of our conversation, if you remember, inside the Alligator Creek Committee, about where would there be a trailhead, where would parking be, how are you gonna attach these deals? How did that all come up? My question even came up. Did they talk to you guys about how that would work and what y'all's plans were? And my answer that I got was, we don't know. They haven't filed for any permits at that particular time. We don't know what their plans are. So the history that me and you have with everything that went on is not good. Back to the lady that was talking here. You have a trust issue. And when I say you, I'm talking to the developer. Is technically not any of my business. But the question I have is, you have a trust issue, and I don't blame you. There isn't anything from all the conversations we had during this whole time about the apartments, then we go to zero lot, all that whole thing. I wouldn't trust you either. Because right now, the optics of this looks like exactly what that gentleman said right there. It's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. If I break a rule, I guarantee you, if I break any city rule, I'm gonna pay the price. So my question to you guys as developers is, why do you not, and to the city, why do you not have to pay a price for what you've done that technically, and the city allowed, and I don't know whose issue this turns out to be to get fixed, but what's done is done, but it looks, the optics of it looks so underhanded. And I wouldn't believe a word that comes out of anybody's mouth in this situation. Now, with that said, some of you know and some of you don't know, we sold our property on Zabor because we inherited a 2-year-old raise and we had to figure out what we were gonna do. But I sold this property to another veteran, a disabled veteran. And what makes me look bad is I look like a used car salesman now because all of the facts I had for being involved with the city, I told them that what they saw was pretty much gonna stay there. You might see a tree or two come down once that development was done, but you were gonna keep that look. So imagine when I get the call from this young couple that says, what happened? I don't know what happened, but I'm gonna find out what happened because I look like an idiot. Now granted, I grew up in Arkansas, we used crayons and coloring books to get through high school is what most people think. I know how that thing goes. But I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but nowhere near as the word stupid come across my forehead. So if I sound a little irritated and feel like you probably think I don't have a dog in this fight because I don't own that house anymore, that's fine. You can feel the way you do. But everybody else that's in Ross Ranch that I represented when I was on that HOA and the times that I was on working with the city on the Alligator Creek Committee thing, this optics and the way this looks is absolutely looks underhanded and it looks like crap. Now how you fix it and how the city helps you fix it or the city does whatever they're gonna do, I don't know. But there is a lot of trust that has been broken, and I'm just here to tell you, Mr. Richard, I don't know if you can dig out of that hole you dug yourself into. And when I say you, I don't know who else to call. I don't know the names of the company. But I wouldn't trust you as far as you could throw you. And I'm old and can't throw much of anything. But I don't know how you are going to fix this. But I'm personally very disgusted and upset how this whole thing went down. And as long, I will be in New Braunfels for at least 3 more years. And I have all intentions of helping Wasser Ranch out and District 4, Councilman Spradley, and ensuring that at least things are done right. And I'll stand up for every one of these homeowners and every one of them. My wife owned a home in Quail Valley from 2005 till we sold it in 2019 to build what was supposed to be our retirement home in Wasser Ranch. And I never being in the military for 22 years, I didn't get involved in city stuff because I moved so much I didn't even know what city I was in half the time. But after that, once I got involved in this, just things don't look right. So I don't know how you fix it, and I don't know what everybody else is gonna say, but to me, and because me and you got a little bit of history when it comes to the rezoning and all of that stuff, and I know that I'm not everybody's favorite person, but you know what? You know, if the sky's blue, the sky's blue. Call it what it is and stand up and let everybody know. If you screwed up, tell them you screwed up. And how you're gonna fix it, I don't have a clue. City, I don't know how you guys help fix this problem. I don't know how we get past the Alligator Creek thing, because I know there's another meeting I'm supposed to be on a call with on the 27th of July. I'm interested to see how the west side of this and the east side of Alligator Creek still goes on with what you did. It is, in my opinion, an egregious act what happened. And how it goes, you fix that problem, I don't know, but I would suggest that somebody figured it out. Now what that lady said that walked out the door, I don't know how that comes with the federal piece, But I'd like to see some answers to people and in writing. Yes, sir.
So I advise that, I'm gonna hand up. I'm gonna advise that y'all start having some real conversations with the parks department. Like, some real conversations. I know that, I've had my sources, and I know Ilda very well, and other people in the city. But there really wasn't a clear intent of what you were gonna do, or how you were gonna go about it. Whether you were going to be on board with the park, or if you were just gonna pay a retainer fee, or whatever that was. But I really advise you to get on board with the Parks Department, and for Mr. Spratley and the district, I would advise everybody, all of his constituents, put in a piece of this pie and say what we want. And I'd say open up your checkbook, because that's what's gonna fix it.
So, if I could, on some of the conversations that you had, so, first off, again, from the city's perspective, this wasn't permitted, and as soon as we realized it, we shut them down. But it wasn't a part of the permits that we saw. There was a misunderstanding. I think the engineer thought they had submitted it to us. We had never seen it. So again, from the city's perspective, we never saw, or we never had an opportunity to approve the work in Alligator.
That's the part of the Alligator Creek that you did not approve, is that correct?
Again, it was not a part of the permits that we reviewed and approved. We approved 1A and 1B.
Who's responsible for oversight of that from the city? Very good.
Again, as soon as we realized it.
But then they took out the whole bank, is that when you realized it? I mean, who's responsible for?
Where's the accountability?
The resources that we have, yes, sir. As soon as we realized it was not a part of the plans, we stopped the work. Now, the other issue you mentioned, the HOA can come in and do work in Alligator Creek. Now, they'll need to do the same type of engineering that was done here, but that is always an opportunity. Now, the city has no program to come in and clean out creeks or dry creeks like Alligator Creek. But again, the HOA does have that opportunity. If there's standing water and they can bring in engineering, they can get that permit if they want. That's always out there.
The Parks Department needs to know that.
Well, like I said, it's one of those things to where I'm in Public Works, so that's one of those things to where they don't review that. So I'm not sure if they meant that the city doesn't do it, but the HOA can.
If I understand what you're saying, you had them stop because they were doing work that wasn't permitted for, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if they've already burned you once, why would you issue them a new permit to keep working there and destroying more stuff?
Well, and again, it's gonna be one of those things to where we're gonna go over it with the fine tooth.
But I mean, you have the authority to not issue a permit, and they wouldn't be able to do anymore.
We can do that.
As long as the permit meets code, this is private property that the private property owner can develop. We do not have a mechanism to stop a private property owner from developing their property as long as it meets zoning and meets code.
So every
And so
time.
they will need to meet, what they're working on now is meeting the code that is in place to continue the work that they started without a permit.
But what it sounds like when you say that, though, is that they can continue to violate the code or not meet the code, and all it really is gonna do is just slightly delay their work until you.
We have
I
a
mean, that
stop
doesn't-
work order issued, so they are delayed on their project, yes.
But
We
they could
do-
just keep doing that then, and there's not
No,
really
sir.
any consequences.
No, sir. They cannot keep violating the code.
Well, you just said you didn't have any way of stopping them.
For this particular violation, we issued a stop work order. And so there is no fine associated with the stop work order as it stands right now. If we move forward and they continue to violate the code, there are mechanisms in place for us to address those with municipal court summons, with fines and things like that. For example, the development that you're talking about on the 35 frontage road, they are required to put up a construction fence in order to protect the health and safety of people in the surrounding areas. They have failed to do that. We will be moving forward with municipal court violations against them starting tomorrow.
OSHA will be out
And
this
that will
week
be,
as well.
I'm sorry?
I said OSHA will be out this week as well.
So those will be daily, that violation will take place daily. So it just
What's the
depends on where we
violation?
are in the process, on what mechanisms we have in place to issue fines. And I know you've been trying to talk for a long time, and I know you have too, so.
Let's go. I think she's
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
for
ma'am.
the city. So my question is, what type of program do we have in place within the city for construction quality management? So we're growing exponentially. The city's approving all of these rezonings, new zones for apartments, residential, whatever, right? They didn't have a permit, or 2 permits, but not certain permits. There was the apartment complex in Oak Creek right at the entrance, no permits. So what are you doing to mitigate all of this? Because we've had 2 stop works within less than a month of 2 large projects without the proper permits.
You just said you don't have
Is there a
oversight.
pre-construction meeting? Is there
Yes.
a database? What is going on? Because to me, if this was my job, I would be fired. There is a strict program in place, construction quality management for contractors, that the DoD for healthcare facilities follows. It's a program that NAFAC and the Corps have in place. It's a 5-year certification, all kinds of stuff. There's a coordination meeting, there's a pre-con meeting, there's meetings and paperwork that needs to be submitted that said, yes, this follows this submittal, this follows this regulation, this follows UFC, da-da-da-da-da. What are we doing as a city to mitigate all of this?
Okay, great question. And please believe me, we all understand the frustration. We've all been out there, we all see it, we all live in this community. We have a very stringent development process that we go through in the city. So there's state law in place, there is municipal ordinances in place, there's codes that need to be met. So it's kind of a long process. I'm gonna try and go through it as quickly as possible because I know that there's lots of people that have questions. But from the beginning, of course, we have a pre-development meeting where we go over the project from the very beginning, and we have meetings throughout the entire process. Mr. Ingles himself will tell you it is an extremely stringent process that can be very frustrating for the developer because we require all codes to be met 100%. So there's several different processes that take place. For a subdivision, which we're talking about here, there's a pre-development meeting, and then there's an LOC process, so letter of certification, that requires all of the entities that permit for these different subdivisions to review the proposal. So you're talking about your utility providers, you're talking about TxDOT if it's on a TxDOT roadway, the city, of course, the county. Once they get through that process, they can move forward with the platting process. They are required to do a public infrastructure permit, which is for all of the roads, the utilities, curbing, sidewalks, and they complete all of the public infrastructure before they are allowed to go vertical on any home builds. Those home builds are, each individual home is permitted as well. Throughout the entire process, we have a team of inspectors who are out, making sure that all of the developments are built to code and to the plans that were submitted. It is one of those inspectors who saw the construction on the I-35 access road and put a stop work order on them. We do the best that we can with the people that we have. There are people who break rules, as we all know. So we are in constant communication. We're in constant communication with Councilmember Bradley and with that development team, and they understand where they're at. And they understand what they have to do in order to move forward. And we will continue to do daily fines on them until they meet our requirements. They are in the permitting process. So they are getting close to the end. And yes, they broke the rules and they started construction before they had a permit. Same thing applies to this. They have been in the permitting process. They were issued a permit. They started work on something that did not have a permit. They broke the rules. We issued a stop work order. We are constantly doing the best that we can. We have a team of inspectors throughout the 45 square miles of this community. And unfortunately, these things are gonna happen, but we're always gonna do our best to make sure that they meet code moving forward.
Were they specifically told that they can't touch Alligator Creek in that watershed and they did it anyway, or was that just a whoops?
No, sir, there was nothing turned in for Alligator Creek. So there was no conversation with the city about Alligator Creek because there was no permit. There were no plans that were submitted. There was nothing that involved that area.
You just said that you went through these days and days and days of permitting, and that never came up in the meeting? That Alligator
I don't
Creek was
recall
part
the
of the...
specific.
And I just asked if there were fines, and y'all said that there weren't any. So are there fines? How much are they?
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing. So, sir, you've been having your hand up for a very long time. All the way in the back.
Can I clarify the permit real quick? So the city has 3 permits right now that are in place. What they call a key I permit, which is public infrastructure for the subdivision. That's for 1A and B. That'll be the subsequent units after that. And then also a floodplain development permit that shows how we're handling the Alligator Creek for the entire development. Okay, that shows the proposed grade and all of this stuff. The gap here is the grading that was in there. This is called ineffective flow area because it's not used for hydraulic benefit.
Ineffective flow area?
Ineffective flow area, yes, because the creek flows around it and it's intended to be outside of it, so it fills up in a heavy event, but we're not using it for hydraulic conveyance, for a benefit, a hydraulic benefit.
So you plan to do it?
So who's telling the truth?
Plan to do that?
The area, yes, in the floodplain development permit, yes, but the grading that was shown in there was not in the grading plans for 1A or 1B, that's what they're talking about.
So what is the truth? Because we just heard that there wasn't a permit to be down to the creek bed, and you're saying there is one.
There is a floodplain development permit that encompasses the entire property and the development activities within the floodplain along Alligator Creek on the property.
And is that with the city? Because when I did a public records request, I only got the 2 construction permits, not the floodplain development permit.
So I don't know specifically what was requested, but there are.
I requested any and all permits that you guys had with the city.
Okay, well, I mean, there are 3, and 3 are approved.
As of Monday, they said you had 2. So somebody either didn't fulfill the public records request appropriately, or you guys just did a permit, or if that's with FEMA or something else.
There is a floodplain permit, but that's not for construction. There is a floodplain permit that's out there, but that does not, a floodplain permit does not allow, it's not for construction.
Which is not.
Why wasn't that provided to me 2 weeks ago?
Again, I don't know your question as far as how you.
Any and all permits for that property.
Like I said, I wasn't a part of that, but if you'll reach out to the city secretary, we'll make sure you get a copy of the floodplain. Or can see it.
It's pretty clear from what you were saying about even though you have some resources devoted to watching out for people who are doing things they're not supposed to be doing or not permitted to be doing, you have a room full of people here who have very specific interests and 2 eyes that will watch what's going on. And I guess what I'm asking, why I've been so insistent about seeing a plan, is I don't know what to keep my eyes on about anything. I don't know that I will ever see a plan. And so I guess what I'm suggesting before this thing wraps up and everybody heads out the door, I'd like a commitment from the folks who are here presenting that we will reconvene at some point when there is a plan, and that we can actually talk about the plan before we start digging stuff up. Can we do that? Is that reasonable to do? Again, I realize there's no mechanism for perhaps a public hearing before you issue a permit. But I would think that given the fact that clearly mistakes have been made, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody in particular, but clearly mistakes have been made, it seems that a small accommodation to those who are impacted by this is to add some sort of additional transparency to this process. And that means getting us back together again, I think, to see what it is exactly we're talking about. He had so many questions about whether it was detention pond or a pool or whatever. He doesn't know what it's going to look like. Nobody seems to know what it's going to look like. And how are we supposed to address our concerns to anything concrete when there is absolutely nothing to look at? So I would say, I would ask that there be some sort of commitment to get back together to at least let us see, so that when something starts happening, all of these eyes can be watching when you cannot be watching. And that we can contact you and say, this doesn't seem like the plan. Does that make some sense? Is that valuable to you? It's valuable to me.
Yes, we have public meetings like this very regularly. I mean, they're gonna have to provide a plan. We can be here to answer questions on the city and the regulatory side. We are absolutely happy to do that. We need I guess you have a main contact, right? That you're working with?
Well, I've got this group, that's part of why I want the list, is because, like I said earlier, we're not going anywhere. We will show you plans when we get something approved. We've got to work through what that's gonna look like, and you have my word that we'll share that. And we're not trying to hide the approved plan. Yes, sir.
This thing is manifold. You've got as many issues as you have a set of eyes in here, from each side of the creek, however you wanna look at it. It's a complicated issue. Bottom line, something went wrong. Something went wrong. Some people will say, well, it was a mistake. Other people will say it was intentional. I've been around 70-something years, and I'm learning that a lot of stuff gets unchecked in this life, especially when it comes to politics and development. I was born and raised in Central Florida, saw the place destroyed. The issues, I live in Clear Springs now, about 3 miles downstream. That, to me, is an issue because I've seen Airport Road, Alligator Creek Crossing, it floods already, has for decades, forever and ever, part of the natural process. I can handle that. But with the development and such going on, and everybody turning an eye to what a problem may be, and well, I got my property and I can do what I want and stuff. There's a letter of the law and there's a spirit of the law. There's two different things there. And usually the spirit of the law loses out to the letter of the law. Anyhow, the problem, I'll try and keep it simple, is how many trees were taken down? This is Tree City, this is a heritage city. This city has heritage all in its manifest. The Constitution, whatever, it's in the civic mind of our heritage. And heritage trees, so on and so forth. Anybody have any idea how many trees there were? You know, it's not the redwood forest yet, they're oak trees, and they've been there a long time. Anybody, when it comes down to paying for them, how much was it? Whenever you know, go through to replant, what are you gonna replant? Great roots?
Not 50, 60-year-old.
You know?
Yeah.
And it'll never be the same. Your intention could be good, but we're gonna make it beautiful. Well, to a lot of people, it was already beautiful. Yeah, it's your property, you can do what you want. But then there's people that have opinions about that, and that's being voiced. And I would just, you know, caution to think about the simple things. And what really gets people irritated, you see the loss of trees, great trees and beautiful trees. All of a sudden it takes the undergrowth and the understory, things like that. It's lost and gone. It's never gonna be the same again. No matter what you do, it'll never be the same again. The city says the project's gonna go through no matter what. It's just the way it is. It's development. That's the way it's gonna be. And there will be further drainage problems downstream. I'd like to know what the tripwire was. What caused this to stop all of a sudden? You say an inspector saw it and stopped it? Why wasn't it seen earlier? You know, and what are the consequences of doing something wrong? Any of us that do something wrong, we drive too fast, we're gonna get a ticket. There's gonna be some kind of problem for us. We're gonna have to be accountable. Where's the accountability? Where's the oversight? I got a feeling that's gonna be lost. This thing's gonna keep on going and it's gonna keep on flowing down to the sea. Always does.
This project went way too far without oversight.
So anyhow, and thank you for allowing this. This is America and the ability to stand up and speak. I thank you for that.
Thanks for coming. I'm gonna go in the back. I'm trying to get some people that have a chance to speak.
If there's a stop work order on Alligator Creek, does that mean that you can still build your houses?
Well, we're a long ways from building houses. It does mean
I-
that we can do the development as approved on 1A and 1B.
You're gonna go
Everything
forward with
else,
that development over here and just kind of push Alligator Creek to the side?
I know because we haven't decided what we're doing as it relates to 1A and 1B. We're honestly all focused on figuring out what that's gonna look like because I don't want it to stay like it is any longer than it has to. So,
I
but-
appreciate that, but I know this is New Braunfels, and
Yeah.
we're building houses like crazy because they're worth a lot of money. People making money hand over fist, and y'all want those houses to go in quick, fast, and in a hurry. But I say, y'all need to fix Alligator Creek before we allow you to move forward on this other project over here. I would like, that's my 10 cents, whatever that's worth.
Did you say that there's stop only on Alligator Creek and not the other part of the building?
that is the part of the work that was being done that was not properly permitted. That's correct.
Is there a permit in place, you're probably not the guy I need to talk to, but is there a permit in place to build a bridge over the dip on Goodwin?
There's actually a project from the city, it's from the 2019 bond, to basically raise Goodwin Lane, right now it's a low water crossing. I think it's gonna be sustain a 25-year storm on it, but there's a project that is coming, I'm not sure timeline wise, I know we're still in design, but that's one of those things to where, again, redoing Goodwin Lane and raising that to be able.
Well, here's, the point of my question really is, if that goes through, they're gonna build a road, a temporary road around where they're building a bridge onto this property. It'll be right over Alligator Creek. Will that be shut down? Will the whole project go kaput because they can't do anything over there?
No, sir. No, sir. I mean, the Goodwin Lane project will continue regardless of this development.
Okay, thank you.
And can you set our expectations, those trees over there that are left are gonna be mowed down as well?
I don't know, we have to, we're gonna have to build a detour, so I'm not sure off the top of my head how many trees could be affected, but we are gonna need to build a detour while we raise Goodwin for traffic to be able to get through. So the project's intent is to minimize any kind of trees if we can.
A temporary egress, you're talking.
Just where we don't completely shut down Goodwin, so folks can still, they'll be able to get around the project as they build the structure.
Yeah, my question's, for you guys. So the drawings that you submit, to the city, to get the development approved, you guys outline notes and stuff like that on there. I'm assuming you're in the design phase since you're saying 1A and 1B, don't know what those plans look like yet. Specifically on the drawings, that were pulled, that you submitted to the city, it says that you have to follow section 18 something, and it specifically says that you have to provide an easement and development of a 10-foot hike and bike trail. Is that gonna be in part of a 1A and 1B design?
It's part of the unit 2. I don't know what sheet that's on, maybe the master plan, but, it is the new plan, but it's with unit 2. I don't recall.
That's actually a note on the subdivision plat.
Yes,
If we have
it's
that.
in the notes, as well as the retention pond.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you had to follow that, because it was just submitted as
No,
to
we
get the development approved.
are
or-
building the trail, and we have to do that, always have. So that's one thing that I think some people have been concerned about, is that trail's not gonna be connected or something like that.
And,
But that
and in
would-
regards to the park that may or may not be put in, I'm assuming that it is, is parking gonna be part of that?
Yes. If we do a city park there, that parking is part of what we are working on with, in that design.
And what does if mean? Can you define what if means?
If as it relates to, like, we don't have,
You said if you need the parking plan.
yeah, so we don't have an agreement with parks yet on what this needs to look like. We also don't have confirmation on all of the creek flood stuff and the grading that's gonna be there. That also needs to be part, to know exactly where this stuff that would be part of the parks plan would be built.
Do you all think it would have been a good idea to get with parks prior to demolishing what could have been part of the park?
So, we have been talking with parks.
And how long and at what extent?
To the extent that we can. Like, we didn't get a permit, the same issue that we have now is the issue we had 3-4 months ago, as it relates to parks. We have to get the creek permitted, so as soon as we got that, what I thought was fully permitted when we started, we aren't believers in do now and ask for forgiveness later. That's horrible. It is a horrible way to run a development business. I've never done it, never will, because I'm glad to be here in front of y'all to answer your questions, but that's not how I intentionally go about projects. So, the same issue exists now that it did 3-4 months ago, which is, we don't have the exact line, like the grades of what everything in the creek's gonna look like. We need to understand that, to understand, one, the location of the trail, where it's gonna run, and two, what the rest of that's gonna look like. So, while I thought we had all of that locked up, and we started talking with Gilda again in earnest about designing it, then this happens, and we're now kind of back where we were as it relates to the creek, which is, we gotta get that approved by the city before I know exactly where and what we can do. We have ideas, because we're not starting from scratch on this, we're making modifications, but that's I don't know if that answers what you're
So,
saying.
is there anybody left from the Alligator Creek project that's on the planning here? I think that plan,
Just Chris.
I think that plan's been, how long's that plan for the Alligator Creek been in existence for?
Oh, I started working on that program in, I think, January of 21.
So wouldn't you have thought that that would have been a good idea to understand the intent of what the city wanted to do? So that we didn't tear and destroy everything at the cost of taxpayers now to put it back?
So we did have conversations early on with the city.
Early on, to what extent?
About what the Alligator Creek trail system was.
So you understood what the concept was?
I understand the park vision, but that's also, some of that may or may not even happen on the north side, the east side. It's a vision. It's not like, what I knew we were obligated to do was extend the trail. Beyond that, it was, hey, we have some plans for the creek. We're working on the east side. We'd like to have conversations with you guys about what the west side, I'm talking about east and west and Goodwin, would look like. We said, okay, great. Let's have a discussion, because our preference is that it's a city-owned area. That's our preference, for a variety of reasons.
Because otherwise you'd have to pay a substantial ordinate amount of money if you didn't get on board with the city.
But we're gonna pay to develop the park. I don't view it, it's not a monetary issue, on the parks or no parks. Like, we'll figure that out, but it's really more about what makes the most sense. To me, it makes the most sense for it to be owned by the city. But we have to work through the process to get there, and we can't do that until we know what that's gonna look like in there.
So what are you committed to then? What are you committing to the city for what this could be, based on the intent of the city?
My commitment to Gilda and to everyone else is, my goal is to implement, and they have a list of things, including parking, gazebo, there's probably 8, 10 things that we would like to be able to implement as part of this development. That is our goal, but we can't get there until we know what that's gonna look like, where the flood's gonna go, and where those structures might be.
So what kind of trees, in terms of replacing heritage trees, what are you all committed to in terms of replacing trees?
All of that would be part of the parks plan, like in terms of landscaping, what that's gonna look like.
So whatever the parks department submits or gives you as far as an intent, you're gonna agree to?
We haven't even talked about landscaping. Right now, we're talking about programming.
So, right, but the intent, that proposal or the design of that park's been around for a while. You said that you've been in talks, so you've seen it.
Yes, I've seen the design, but the design doesn't, there's a parking lot in the floodplain. And from my recollection, it's been a little while since I've seen it. Like, there are certain things, just because it was part of the vision, doesn't mean it's actually constructible. Our goal is to achieve the goal of the Alligator Creek plan. Continue the connection of the trail, have some sort of amenity in this area, and that would be potentially seating areas, it's going to have some parking.
And to provide public parking.
Correct, that is part of it.
And how much public parking how much public parking did your plan propose?
There's none. There was no bankhead in the committee as of right now. There's not a bankhead at all.
So,
I don't know if I'm answering your question, I'm trying to give you as much as I can as to where we are.
I'm just trying to get to the point where we can repair. Damage is done, and we want to repair.
And that's, I wanna get it figured out so we can go ahead and start figuring that out, and I can tell you guys, hey, look, this is what we're gonna do. We're not there yet, and that's why I'm saying I'm not gonna go away, I will follow up as we get those
Totally.
plans. Talk to Gilda, talk to the people.
Do we have somebody who can collect phone numbers?
We did.
Well, I can't have those.
And that's not an obligation, as it relates to code, that's not an obligation.
That lady with the federal information comes through the Army Corps of Engineers.
For everybody in there,
Because you guys destroyed something without having a permit.
this was a plan long before that, but I understand
It wasn't part of the first plan that you had. The plan that you put before the rezoning commission was not this plan. It showed what you were gonna build, it didn't have anything to do with Alligator Creek. We didn't want it in the first place, but the city went ahead and approved it. So we're on a hamster wheel here, it's going round and round and round and round. It wasn't on your original one, I was there, I saw it.
Can we come? Yes, ma'am.
So, the last time that we met outside of city council chambers, I asked you, would you commit to saving the 2 large trees that remain on the property? Will you commit to that tonight?
You're talking about,
I'm
and I
talking
told
about
you.
The very large
yeah.
tree that's
So
on
is-
the Orion Drive side that was, in front of the house that was just demolished, and the tree that stands along the banks of the creek where there is a pool there that still remains.
Yeah, so, as I told you the other night, that is our goal. I can't guarantee that anything is gonna stay or not stay. We have other things that
But
are
those
coming
are
into play.
protected trees.
Do what?
Those are state of Texas protected trees, they're of a certain diameter.
If we're not allowed to take them down, I promise you we won't be.
But no. What if she's asking you, are you going to voluntarily offer to protect the trees? What are you willing to do when you're not forced to?
Without knowing, so I can't, if somebody, because we have competing concerns here, right? And this is what makes it difficult. If I sit here and say, hey, if we leave that tree, we've got flooding problems. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can't, that's why I can't
The
tell
one
you.
large tree is well above the pool that exists.
The one that's on the top side,
Yes,
our goal, the last version
that's
of
a
the first one.
massive tree. That
Ladies and
tree is gonna
gentlemen,
be a
we're
problem.
already over on our time. I'm gonna give you 5 more minutes and then we're gonna have to wrap this up.
Thank you. That's one area that we're looking at doing the park, by the bigger tree on the top side.
Okay.
It falls under the same thing, we've gotta figure out the floodplain.
That would be a lovely aesthetic to have.
I totally agree, and as I told you, our goal is to make that happen. I just can't sit here and say, I can't do that because there's other things that might impact. And I wish, honestly, I wish I could, because it would probably make you feel better and everybody else feel better if I could say yes. I just can't do that.
So, going forward, the plans that you're going to create, you say possibly within the next 60 days, we will be able to see something on paper.
That's our hope. It depends on how quick we can work with the city to get it done, but from our standpoint, we're gonna be working on, we have been working, James, pretty much around the clock, trying to come up with something. That's the goal, but it all depends on the level of comments and feedback. So that's the goal. Let me go here, so.
I've got a question, you've got those 2 trees there, if you have to move them, can you save them and move them to another location at least? Not destroy them?
Potentially.
Right, because that happened to the last city I was in, and they moved 150-year-old trees to the original save them. So that's better than nothing.
Right, yes, yes.
But I know it costs about $100,000 tree, and that was 20 years ago.
And they won't commit to that.
Right, but rather than tear them down, there's gotta be some way to save them, because they're old,
Right.
you know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can I just say that I think, well, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for anybody else. A lot of the frustration here is you keep coming back with the same refrain, when people ask all kinds of different questions is, well, we don't have the plan, we didn't know exactly what all they wanted to do and all this. So what the frustration level I think has risen is because you're admitting you didn't know all about what you wanted to do with the trail and what the city expected you to do or the creek and all this, but yet you went in there and you destroyed the creek. So you're admitting that you keep giving us the answer that, well, we just don't have all this down yet. It's our plan is not finished yet. So if you didn't really have a plan, why did you go in there and destroy the creek?
We did have a plan when we started.
But you keep answering almost every other question with, I don't know, because we don't have a plan. We haven't got that far in our plan yet.
I would say in our revised plan may be a better way to put that, because what we had as a plan has been changed at this point, or we're in the midst of reevaluating and changing. That's what I mean by that. We didn't go down there with no plan at all. We had conversations with those, internally with the city to address all these things.
So your plan was all along was to destroy the creek? Or what?
I mean,
That's not a very good steward of land.
You keep falling back on that about the plan, but then you say there is no plan, and then now you're saying, well, we had a plan, but. So what, in the plan, was it to destroy the creek? Because that's what happened.
At what point did you guys decide to do that? Like how many months ago?
Was
Or
that in the
years?
plan?
Was that part of the plan?
we have had plans to do that.
The floodplain development permit included the removal of the trees, right, that's just the vegetation of it, to take out the obstructions of that. That was right out of the gate.
But what was the point though? If you said you'd been talking to the city and you knew about this whole deal with the trails and all that, why would you destroy right where the trail, because look, there's already, you realize right behind Wasser, there's already a paved pathway back there. You're aware of that, right? And it goes right along by the creek, and there's beautiful trees and all that. So did you, in your plan, did you not expect that that was gonna be connected, that's what's in the 2020 hike and bike? Well then, so then why would you destroy the creek like that if you knew that there was gonna be paths go right literally along the creek? And where there's trees and vegetation, wildlife habitat, why would you destroy that?
Especially if you said you were in talks with the city about a park.
That's what we're not following.
I understand what you're saying, but that
Trail, we don't have.
like, I guess I may not be following. We've always had plans to extend the trail. We have to do that. That's part of our plan, always has been. That hasn't changed, it's not gonna change. I'm not sure. Thank you all for coming.